Greetings to all my clan members around the world. It's sad that COVID-19 has caused an almost total cancellation of events worldwide, including our Menzies gathering. But we now seem to see some light at the end of the tunnel. Global deaths have been frighteningly high, and everyone has felt the impact of this virus. We decided to try and offer our members a little slice of clan activity amid the chaos of the world, and to that end have created this mini virtual gathering for you to enjoy online. We hope that the footage we have put together on our Facebook page and other social media sites has reached many of you. Sue Barnes has been putting teasers on the website to tempt you in and to keep your interest in the clan alive. Our events programme over the clan weekend is always varied, and whether you would have been here in person or have been looking at post-event photographs, we hope to give you a reminder of our castle and clan events. We had no choice but to cancel this year's celebrations because of the limited number of flights allowed to enter Britain and the quarantine laws. The various Highland Games around Scotland were also cancelled. A few of us have been meeting online over the past weeks to put this video selection together for you. Your clan society is alive and well, and David Henderson, our castle manager, has worked hard and almost single-handedly during the lockdown to maintain the castle, the gardens and the mausoleum. Some staff had to be furloughed sadly, and expenditure had to be cut back, but you will see from the footage of our little mini clan march that David has nevertheless managed, with the help of the local farmer, to resurface our potholed access road to the castle, so I'm sure you'd like to thank him for all his effort on our behalf. Restrictions of movement in Scotland were more stringent than those in England, and until very recently Scots could only travel 5 miles from their own home. As rules were relaxed, some of us decided to travel north from the other side of the border, although we are still socially distancing and being careful around each other. Many of you I know in Australia and the US are back in quarantine, and we send our best wishes to you and to those who are separated from their families. We look forward to seeing some of you at the clan gathering next year. This has obviously been a financially difficult year for the castle, but with the friends of Castle Menzies money trickling in, furloughing and cutbacks, we'll make it through. Now that the castle has been allowed to reopen, we hope that tourists coming back cautiously will also come our way. We've followed all the government safety advice and will limit numbers entering the castle, and are sure that they will enjoy their visit despite the restrictions. Please sit back and enjoy the mini videos that have been put together by your council members. I hope they will make up, in part, for the gathering we are all missing, and will tempt you all to return for an even better clan gathering next year in 2021.
I'm standing in front of the Menzies stone. To be able to join the inner elite of the clan in the old days, you had to be able to lift this stone. And I can move it, and that is all I am doing. Standing in front of the original castle entrance, with its yett and the wooden door behind. As you can see from the yett, it is different ways it's built. So it's intertwined and almost impossible to take apart once it's been built. Let's head into the castle now. We now move in to the original kitchen of the castle. With the oven, in the baking oven in the left hand side, and what amazes me most about it is it has the gun slit at the back. And as you can see here, this would be how it's set up, so the people would actually work inside. inside the fireplace. The fireplace, when the restoration started, when we came in to do it, had been filled in and just a normal sized fireplace. Opened it up to this magnificent fireplace that we can see here. And as you can see around the kitchen, over the years, the various bits and pieces that would be used in the kitchen. And this would supply all the food to the Great Hall in the next floor up. But before we go there, I usually get people to try and figure out what these 4 hinges are for. There was something hanging here, too low for a door, but nobody has any idea what they're for. Now we have the guard room, which is right beside the original entrance, with a window facing south, meat hooks on the top, later on used as a storage room, this one. But the small bit to the left-hand side, it's possible it was to see who was at the door, but you don't get a view of it. One of the theories put in earlier was it was a place where a prisoner that had fallen out with the Menzies would be manacled by the arm in the inside and he was outside. We now go into the main hall, dining room or red room. But before we go in, I'll point out another gun slit. Now the unusual bit about this one is it's a hook, which the rifleman would come, put his rifle through there. He would have a piece of leather that he would hook over there and the gun would go in there. And that would hold the weight of the gun while he's shot. In Scotland, in most of the Scottish castles, it traditionally was a ring with a sealed hook. Down in England, it was this system, so it's possible it was an English architect that built the castle. This is the original entrance into the main hall, with its portraits of various chiefs and their families. Also behind this door here, you can see where the staircase comes up. In the left-hand side here, we can see a portrait of Sir Robert Menzies, the second last of the chiefs in the direct line, who, when his funeral took place in the early 1900s, they reckoned it was one of the last of the old traditional Highland funerals, Highland chiefs' funerals. Another old story about this room is this was the room that the Clan Society held its gatherings after the castle was bought by the Society. And it was traditional that rather than clap when they were appreciative of the speaker, they used to stamp their feet. Well, this floor below us was one of the last floors to be reconditioned or renewed. And everybody expected everybody just to disappear the foot down to the original stone floor, which is underneath. And another bit of more recent history is behind this door. This door led to the 18th century wing, where the stairs were put in then. And as you can see from the back of the door, during the Second World War, it was used by the Polish Army as a pharmacy. And we go through here into a sitting room, which has been done in Victorian pine. And the reason it was left is one of the stipulations in one of the grants that we received for the restoration was that we kept this. Because the room itself is very interesting, because if you look up to the roof, you've got plasterwork that commemorates the Union of Crowns. And behind some of the panel work, there was also plasterwork on the walls. The room The door through at the window, that leads out to what was the secondary staircase. And all these Z-plan castles had two staircases, the main one we're using, plus a secondary one that was built from the first floor and jutted out. But it was flattened off and taken away when the 18th century wing was built. But you can see these, that's the original entrances. And this is possibly a small garde-robe, this one, that was then used as an entrance when they changed everything around in the 18th century. We go through to this next room, which is reputed to be Mary Queen of Scots' bedroom. And certainly the money that came to rebuild the castle, quite a bit of it came from Mary Queen of Scots, who I think more than likely got it back from her cousins who burnt the place away. And the Menzies were very close to Mary Queen of Scots. Now, it's been set up for various, it's the present chief and his father. We also have Dulip Singh, the Black Prince of Persia, who in the late 1800s hired the castle. He stayed 10 years, well, he did 10 years shooting in Persia in various estates around Aberfeldy. In the castle walls, there is various wall saves, but this one is the only one in a small room, and it's the only one that's got secret compartments in it. Bearing in mind, this would be covered and hidden, so you would have to find it first, and then when you found this, these two stone slabs there, unfortunately I can't get them out now, but this one comes out forward and leaves you with a shallow but wide secret compartment. When you pull that one out, there's another one on the left hand side, pull it out and it's a deep compartment. So it's possible that that's where they hid the jugs, the communion jugs, the various bits and pieces that the Catholic Church used for the communions, which would have to be hidden at that time. When the Victorian modifications came in, the door that we came in to get into the main hall, the original door, was sealed off, and this door was put in its place. And the food then came up from the Victorian kitchens, which were at the back, and it was put on this early hot plate. There was two uses for this hot plate: keep the food warm and keep the room warm. Because what they did from it, the back of it, they ran a pipe all the way around the base of the wall, and that kept the main dining room hot. This room is the second of the pair bedrooms. This was the room that Bonnie Prince Charlie slept in 1746 for the 2 nights that he stayed here on his way to Culloden. Quite a strange situation, because the Menzies chief at the time was a government man. His wife was a Jacobite, which wasn't strange. Most of his clan were fighting with Bonnie Prince Charlie. And just after Charlie left, the government troops came in and took over the castle and chased them along to Farley. We now come into the room above the Great Hall. One of the 18th century additions was to divide this room in two. So it was 2 sitting rooms and a walkway that went from the stairs down through to the halfway through the room, across the other side and into the 18th century wing, or vice versa. As you can see, it's been set up as our main museum room. The roof, again, commemorating the Union of the Crowns. So the roof was put in at the same time as the one down below. So it was an original roof for what was a big room originally. On the display cabinet here of weaponry, you have the Menzies broadsword, which was reputed to have been used at Bannockburn. And certainly that's where the Menzies got their ground up here from, supporting Bruce at that time. Here we have a model of the castle. You've got the original Z in the front, 16th century main block, originally built with a flat roof and open to the elements at the top. In the 18th century, they built this bit on the back, which then became the main part of the house, with the entrance, the new entrance at the front that we came through to enter the castle was built then. You went straight through it, out the back, into the main staircase, and that served the whole castle. The staircase we're using now became the serving staircase at that point. 1840s, the west wing was built. They were all trying to flog the castle to their castles to Queen Victoria, and this was the Menzies adding a Victorian wing to it. This series of drawings here gives you an idea how big the complex round the castle was. The area we're in just now, the Z there, 18th century wing there, and Victorian wing there. And then you can see, there's the kitchens, the scullery, went round as the first quadrangle at the back, and then leading up to the greenhouses, you had this other quadrangle there as well. So a quadrangle in the inner one, and they're calling it a courtyard in the outer one. One of the disadvantages of the fire, the place of Weem, apart from losing the house, was they lost all their early papers, which caused a bit of a problem actually proving they owned the land that they were actually on. So when they got that reinstated, they built the castle. They were determined to have a room that if it went on fire again, wouldn't go. And this room, totally surrounded by stone, has a window in it, admittedly, stone slab over the top, and all the paperwork was in there. At the time of the castle's sale, when they lifted the slab up, the room was full of papers. They were all put in groups of paper, and they were sold in lots, so they can be traced. This room, the paired bedroom, master's paired bedroom associated with the small one, has been turned over to a museum in Archibald Menzies, the plant gatherer or botanist. Sailed as a ship's surgeon, and found various plants over the years. He'd born in Styx, just across the river from us here, and he did serve his time originally in the gardens at Castle Menzies, it's believed. We're now up on the top floor. Originally, as I said, when the castle was built, this would have been open roof, and then 40 years, say, after it was built, the roof was put on. So these timbers are possibly about 1600s, maybe slightly earlier. You can see up here the pistol holes along underneath each window, just to remind you it is a fortified house. Again, this is a good one for the trajectory. Pistol would sit in there and you'd be able to move it back and forward, and the barrel would stick out the hole and just move back and forward there, underneath each of the windows. This floor was extensively remodelled when they built the Victorian wing in 1840, and it was a series of joined rooms, more than likely staff rooms up here, housekeepers certainly. And the last of the paired bedrooms, you'll see how it was laid out. Coming across here, you can see you've got the various chimneys that seem to be coming up here. This is the southeast turret. Now you can see in this turret, you can actually see the proof that it was actually open, because at the floor you've got the drain holes. And just enlarged and gone up the way. These turrets were all panelled in the Victorian times, and it was rumoured that one of them had a stone covered in blood that couldn't be washed off, and this was where the story of the ghost of the castle came from. But when they opened up all four turrets, they couldn't find any stain on the floor, so I believe it's still getting looked into. Coming down here, on the right hand side, we have a fireplace, Victorian surrounding the fireplace. But on the outside of the wall, when you're visiting the castle the next time, if you look at the east wall, look up to the southeast turret, go past the window, and you'll see a massive great gun slit that's sealed in. So somewhere behind this fireplace, which comes all the way from the kitchen, there was a platform for a gun. What we've got here is the original watchtower of the castle. It's quite amazing. Again, they didn't knock it down when they built the roof on. All they did was build the roof above it. And you can see the Roman numerals on the roof beams. That's the original roof beams that were put in maybe 1590, 1600. Quite amazing. You can follow the numbers. And this was the type of decoration that you had in all the Victorian rooms. So you had the wallpaper and the wood, the pine wood around it. And behind the red curtain is a small walkway to a higher level, and we reckon that is the watchtower at this side of the castle. So diagonally across from the one we were just in. We're now on a brand new part of the castle. This was a staircase built to allow access to the Victorian dining room, stroke ballroom, which stretched through these wooden doors into what was ballroom dining room in the 18th century wing here. Went all the way back. Prior to the Clan Society taking over, it was used as a badminton court by the locals in Weem. Behind us, we have a picture of Bill and Ann Dewar, who were responsible for both for the restoration of the Mausoleum and the driving forces behind the restoration of the castle. An amazing couple to work with. Anne would get you to do anything, and Bill would try and stop you from doing it. And the main ballroom here is now named after them, the Dewar Room. So you can see the Victorian panelling. Again, bare walls, in this case painted, be wallpapered more than likely early on. Fantastic fireplace. Couple of pictures from the 1842 visit by Queen Victoria of the Menzies marching or getting together to march to Taymouth Castle to become a guard of honour. One of the problems that the Marquis of Bodobin had at the time was when he went to call his Highlanders out to impress Queen Victoria, he only had 50. He asked his factor why, and the factor turned around and, "You told me to clear the ground, so I did." So that was the Bodobin clearances in the 1830s. Menzies were not quite as bad. As you can see, they did manage to muster something like 200 men. There is another story about that, is they had problems finding kilts for the two until Sir Robert Menzies, Sir Neil Menzies was chief at the time, Sir Robert was his son. He remembered that the curtains in the lodges up in Rannoch were all tartan, so I believe they lost their curtains in Rannoch and they became kilts in Weem.
Greetings everybody. As you may know, one of the highlights of the annual clan gathering is the whisky tasting session, which takes place in the Great Room and is hosted by our good friend Ross Dennis from Dewar's World of Whiskies. We've been running the whisky tasting at the gathering for about 5 years now, and it is always one of the first gathering activities to sell out, such as its popularity. Ross takes us through 3 or so exceptional whiskies from the local Dewar's distillery. Dewar's and the Clan Mingus have a long association, as many of you will know, with the name Dewar itself being a sept of the Clan Mingus. For our virtual gathering, we thought it would be nice for a few of us to talk about our passion for whisky, and indeed our favourite whiskies, and what makes them so special. My first introduction to serious whisky, as opposed to the generic brands, first came at a clan gathering in the late 70s or early 80s, and it would have been at the Aileen Cragan, which at the time boasted over 80 different Scottish whiskies, some of them extremely rare. So here are a few in my collection, and they're quite wide ranging. We have the whisky from Tennessee, from Kentucky, from Japan, even a rye whisky from Germany, and then of course the Scottish whiskies over here, including the Dewars that we know and love so well, along with the Aberfeldy brand. Now I have a confession to make, that my favourite whiskies actually come not from Scotland but from Kentucky, which is why the bourbons are featuring quite well here. And my favourite is this. It's the Angel Envy brand, which is a small batch whisky, a small batch bourbon I should say, made in Kentucky. Interestingly, this small distillery was bought by Bacardi, the parent company to Dewar's, just a few years ago. You cannot buy this in the UK at all, so it's very special to me because I only buy it when I visit the United States. Now, as I think we should be focusing on Scottish whisky today, I've selected this very rare single malt of Craigellachie, which was produced by whisky expert Greg Dillon and is part of the Rare Cask series. Distilled in 2007 and bottled in 2018, so 11-year-old, it is 46.2% by volume. It was originally put into an ex-bourbon cask before being put into an ex-Oloroso sherry cask for 6 months prior to bottling in order to amplify the fruity, spicy flavour. There were just 220 of these 20 centilitre bottles produced worldwide, so once it's gone, it's gone. The notes show elements of figs, raisins and sherry, and I think one of the reasons I like it so much is because of the clear hint of bourbon sweetness. Now, it is much debated as to whether it's acceptable to drink fine whisky with any form of additive, and to be sure there are brands out there that lend themselves to being consumed by the likes of Orange or Coke. My preference is generally neat, although I can sometimes use a little water to open up the flavours, but never ice, which in my humble opinion works well with bourbon, but never with Scottish whisky. And if you're using water, what better water to use than that which feeds the spring from which the Aberfeldy whisky is distilled from the Petley Burn in Aberfeldy. Well, I hope you enjoyed this short appreciation, and whatever your favourite whisky is, enjoy that too. Slangavar.
Welcome to our wee whisky tasting for the virtual Menzies Clan Gathering 2020. My name's Eoghann Menzies and I'm here to go through one of my favourite whiskies, the Aberfeldy single malt whisky. Firstly, I thought we would go through the traditional way to drink whisky in Scotland. Firstly, I think whisky should never be drunk as a shot. No, definitely not recommended. Nor should it ever be drunk with a straw. No. Whiskey should be drunk slowly and for maximum enjoyment. Preferably from a Glencairn whisky glass, such as this. Lovely. The Dewar's here, like I've said, is Aberfeldy single malt whisky. Single malt being that it's from one distillery. This distillery is our local distillery and closest to the castle, and is well worth booking on to the Aberfeldy Distillery tour for future clan gatherings. It's a really interesting, informative tour around a really nice traditional Scottish distillery. This whisky in particular is really nice. It's got a lovely smooth taste with some fruity overtones, as well as a really deep lingering aftertaste when you going down your throat as well, which is it's always nice. This is definitely one that is very palatable and goes with most occasions. And it's just a sort of really nice example of a Highland single malt whisky. Yes, there's been many different, as is the way with many families, there's always one or two different stories going through the families of illicit distilleries and all sorts of different endeavours with people trying to make their own whisky at home. And one from my personal family was a story that was from my great granddad, and it was when he ran the post shuttle or post carriage down from Cullen to Kenmore and along the loch side. And one afternoon he picked up a gentleman at Cullen, and as there was a long journey in those days, albeit maybe only 16-20 miles, it would take most of the day or afternoon. And so he sparked up a conversation with this gentleman. Through the course of chatting, he was being a little cagey about what his job was or what he was doing, but he kept talking to him and kept being friendly and just finding out what was going on with this gentleman that was travelling through, and eventually found out that he was from the Customs and Excise Office, and that he'd heard that there was an illicit distillery in the area, and that he was here to investigate that and to subsequently attempt to shut it down. So upon delivering the gentleman to Kenmore, to the village at the end of his route, he then quickly ran home, dismantled his distillery, his distill, took it apart, and quickly said nothing more about it. So yes, we have many different stories in our family of us trying to evade the law while also concocting our own whiskies and distilleries and stills at home. But definitely there's nothing compared to a proper Highland grand distillery such as Aberfeldy, yes, it was always an interesting story to hear about the running from the Customs and Excise man. But that's my little short clip on my favourite whisky and some little tidbits for enjoying it, and some of my little family stories as well. So I hope you had a nice time, and back to you.
Hi there, I'm Eoghann Menzies, that's Mingus to you in Scotland, North American Council member here in Southern California, dressed in Highland gear in 100-degree heat. Welcome to our whiskey tasting online, or virtual online whiskey tasting. It's the first ever because of the way things are going now in the world. We thought we would do an online whiskey tasting and show you some of our favorite scotches. Today I went through a few to decide which one that I wanted to feature. But none of these are them. Instead, I wanted to do one that I have recently really come to like. I discovered it last fall and I'd never heard of it before. It is Jura. From the Isle of Jura off the west coast of Scotland in the Inner Hebrides. Never heard of it. till last fall when I discovered the Scotch. And I did some research on it. It was founded in 1810 by the Laird of Jura, Archibald Campbell. Yeah, I know, a Campbell. Since then, it has been through 7 owners and managers, and has in the past, couple of decades reinvented itself for world market. It's really nice single malt that is aged in white oak bourbon barrels, American, and it has a lovely, lovely cracked pepper, chocolately taste. Considering it is from Jura and runs through peat moss and all of that, it does not taste peaty at all. It's actually really nice. Oh, that's lovely, especially at 10 o'clock in the morning. It's warming and has sort of the typical fresh sea air finish that is pretty typical with Jura scotches. This one is really nice. It's an easy drink. It's an easy scotch if you're just, having a wee dram in the evenings, especially in Southern California, where our winters are like Scottish summers, and it's a lovely drink. Oh, that's nice. Slanchava. Enjoy your Jura, or whichever brand you choose. And let's put the lid on that before the angels get blitzed. See you next year in 2021. We hope it'll be pretty big, considering this year is a write-off. And maybe we'll have some Jura even then. Slanchava again.
Hello everybody from the clan, and welcome to my bar here in Germany, my little whiskey bar, where you see I've got a few bottles there to try out. Hopefully not all this evening. But today I've decided on a very nice Aberfeldy. Clearly I'm biased because of the clan situation and the distillery itself, but this Aberfeldy I haven't seen in Scotland. I bought it here in Germany. It's 18 years old, it's a single cask whisky, and it's a Marsala hogshead. A very, very different taste. It still has the very same Aberfeldy notes that we'd expect to have from the Aberfeldy whiskies, but this one has been 18 years in a Marsala cask, and it is absolutely delicious. I may go silent for a while I enjoy this. So, to everybody, to the clan, Slanjava. Absolutely beautiful. And I hope to see everybody next year at Castleminnis. And bye for now.
So now we're going to make penicillin, which is a relatively new cocktail on the bar scene, and it was actually invented by an Australian in New York, and it has become a very popular drink. And I think it's quite appropriate for the times that we're living in at the moment. We all need some penicillin somehow. Okay, so I've got my cocktail glass with my half dome of ice. Oh, that glass has grown a bit. And I have already put my lemon and lime juice, freshly squeezed, with ice into my cocktail shaker. I'm going to add some fresh sliced ginger. Now some people actually like to make a ginger and honey syrup, cook it up on the stove, let it cool, and then use that. I like to just add raw ginger because I love my ginger in everything. So we'll add that. Again, I'm going to use the maple syrup rather than honey. I don't have shares in, what brand is that? 100% pure Canadian maple syrup. It's great. So add the maple syrup, and of course we're going to add oh, here we go, here's this wonderful cork again. I shouldn't have put the top back on. Okay, so we're going to add 70 mils of the Dewar's 12-year-old whiskey. So remember, I've put lime and lemon juice in beforehand, otherwise I'd get all fumbly. I think I've had too many whiskey sours in making this video. And so put the lid on. Oh. Yep. And the measuring cup. Give it a good shake. Now I've used a blended Scotch whisky, and you'll understand why. Yep, perfect. Oh, so let's strain this and pour into this gigantic glass. I don't know who brought that. And to top off, what I'm going to do is use a single malt Scotch whisky, which gives a more peaty, smoky flavour. And I'm going to pour it onto the top very gently. This is going to be really interesting to see how it tastes. I've actually used Glen Moray, which I think is quite generic, maybe in Scotland. And to that, I think I will just add some lemon zest. I don't like all those fancy umbrellas and anything else. Maybe a little bit of orange zest too would be nice. We'll give it a quick little stir. Oh no, we don't stir it. We don't stir it. Wow. So, oh, that is really interesting. That is beautiful. I get the taste of the peaty single malt whiskey. I can taste the lime and the lemon juice and the maple syrup, and of course the Dewar's 12-year-old. Wonderful. So, as we say in Australia, cheers.
Stoorworm. The very first and very worst dragon ever to exist from the beginning of time. Compared to the dragon of Stoorworm, all other dragons are teeny tiny, namby-pamby kind of dragons who couldn't frighten a baby, let alone a whole country. And the dragon of Stoorworm certainly did frighten a whole country when it decided to set up residence there. And this country was called Scotland. The first scary thing about the dragon of Stoorworm was its size. It was absolutely ginormous. Wouldn't have been such a problem for Scotland when the Stoorworm arrived if it had been a friendly sort of dragon. You know, the type that greets you with a pleasant good morning or good afternoon and inquires how things are with you and asks after the health of your granny. But then its enormous size wouldn't have quite as been so scary. But if the dragon of Stoorworm inquired as to the whereabouts of your granny, or indeed any of your relatives, it was because it intended to eat them. And if you tried to avoid telling it or hesitated in your reply, it'd most likely gobble you up instead. The second scary thing about the dragon of Stoorworm was its enormous tail, which had jaggy spikes along it. When it was in a bad mood, which was often, the Stoorworm lashed its tail about, causing considerable damage. Churches, houses, whole villages, and even a mountain or two were crushed and swept away. The third scary thing about the dragon Stoorworm was its eating habits. The Stoorworm would open its mouth and swallow cows and horses and sheep, ducks, geese, and any other livestock. Quite often it liked to toast these first, scorching anybody who happened to be passing by and setting ablaze to thatched roofs of cottages, of surrounding fields as well. Before long, Scotland was in a bad way. There were no crops growing, they'd all been eaten by the Stoorworm, and there was little livestock, and soon there would be no fresh water. For every morning, the Stoorworm woke up and opened its huge mouth and yawned, swallowing gallons of water from the loch where it rested its gigantic head. The king sent 3 of his wisest men to talk to the dragon and ask it to stop causing so much trouble and to suggest that it might like to go away. The Stoorworm ate 2 of the wise men, but the third managed to escape, running fast. He came back with a message to say that the Stoorworm would stop destroying villages, guzzling cattle, and incinerating crops if the king sent a pretty girl that it could eat every morning. As soon as the menfolk heard this, they hurriedly locked up their daughters, wives, and sisters. But the womenfolk, who weren't slow to catch on and not minded to hang about, had already gone and hidden themselves. The only girl that was left was the king's own daughter, the brave Princess Wyllie. Now the Princess Wyllie was brave and good, and she said that she would go and sacrifice herself if it would help to stop the dragon Stoorworm from ruining the whole country. The king, her father, was very upset when she came to say goodbye to him. He held up his famous sword, the Snickersnapper, and cried out that he'd give his sword, his kingdom, and the hand of his daughter in marriage to anyone who could free Scotland. To which the Princess Wyllie replied that her father could go and do what he liked with his kingdom and his sword, but as far as she was concerned, her hand belonged to her, and she could marry whom she pleased. She went up to the tower of the castle to wait and see who would turn up to slay the Stoorworm. Many warriors from here and there, and this land and that, came riding up to the castle in the hope of gaining a kingdom, a sword, and a princess to marry. Princess Wyllie, who always secretly listened when her father was negotiating terms, noted that these men listed their rewards for their work in that order: the kingdom, the sword, and the princess. She was always named last, and frequently they didn't even ask her name. From her seat in the tower, Princess Wyllie inspected the knights, nobles and commoners as they rode out in turn each morning to do battle with the dragon Stoorworm. They never came back. No trace of them was ever found. Well, perhaps just the occasional stirrup or plume feather from the knight's helmet. Things that got stuck in the throat of the dragon Stoorworm and were spat out across the loch. Although the Princess Wyllie was sad that these warriors perished, none of them had quite touched her heart until one day a boy called Asipattle wandered along the road. Asipattle was the 7th son of the 7th son, and as such a different kind than most boys. Instead of rushing about and fighting and playing noisy games, he liked to sing and sit by the fire and read and think up and make up poems and stories and songs. This had got him into a lot of bother with his parents and brothers, who all shouted at him all of the time to move himself and to do what they considered real work. "Asipattle, can you not help milk the cow?" his mother would say. To which he would reply, "I've just made up a beautiful poem about the cow walking home along the glen. Would you like to hear it?" "Asipattle, can you not help plough the fields?" his father would ask, to which Asipattle replied, "There's a song I've written about a ploughman and his horse. Would you like me to sing it to you?" "Asipattle, come help plant the crops or we will beat your bones," his older brother shouted at him, to which Asipattle replied, "I know a story about sowing and reaping. Would you like me to tell it to you?" But looking at their faces of his brothers, he realised that they would indeed beat his bones. So Asipattle jumped from the hearth and went off to find his fortune. And so, early one fine morning, Asipattle arrived, singing on the road to the castle. From her tower, the Princess Wyllie looked down and thought, this one looks interesting. As Asipattle glanced up and caught a sight of the princess, he thought, When Asipattle knocked on the castle door, he was taken at once to the king. Now the king was in desperate state. It was nearly breakfast time and no volunteers had arrived to slay the dragon. The king was beginning to think he might have to strap on his mighty sword, the snickersnapper, and go and fight the dragon himself, when a servant announced that someone wanted to speak to him. On seeing Asipattle, the king's heart sank right down into his blue slippers. The boy was short and slight and covered in a layer of dusty peat, and more, he had neither a horse, nor armour, nor lance, nor mace, nor sword. "How will you fight the dragon, Stoorworm?" the king asked. "Oh, I didn't stop by to fight the dragon," replied Asipattle. "I was passing on the road and saw a girl in your tower, and I thought her pretty enough. She an honest look about her, and I wanted to meet her and share my poems and stories." Before her father could reply, Princess Wyllie stepped from behind the curtain. "Now you've met me, what do you think? Do you still want to talk with me?" Princess Wyllie saw that Asipattle's hand was smudged with peat ash. Nevertheless, she took it into her own. "Hold on a minute," said the king. "There's a matter of dragon Stoorworm to be dealt with first," and he explained the situation to Asipattle. "That's a bit inconvenient," said Asipattle, keeping a hold of the princess's hand. "I agree," said the princess, not letting go of the hand of Asipattle. Would it be best to get rid of the dragon Stoorworm before we sat down to chat?" The king told Asipattle about the 3 rewards, to which Asipattle replied, "I have no wish to be king, for I fear it would get in the way of my storytelling. I have no wish for your sword, Snickersnapper, for I might be tempted to kill with it, and if I did, I might also kill my own spirit. Asipattle paused and looked at Princess Wyllie and then said, "I would like to get to know your daughter, but it's really up to us to decide whether we get married or not." Princess Wyllie smiled at Asipattle and they went off together to plan their defeat of the dragon Stoorworm. Each morning, when the dragon Stoorworm awoke, it would yawn mightily and take in a great drink of water from the loch. That morning, as the water rushed into the Stoorworm's mouth, a tiny boat holding Asipattle and Princess Wyllie was also swept inside. They rowed as fast as they could, and their boat was carried past its sharp teeth, over his dreadful tongue, and down the throat of the monster. They hung on as the boat was battered from side to side, until finally, bumping about, they arrived at the Stoorworm's liver. Princess Wyllie held the boat steady as Asipattle took a knife and dug a hole in the flesh of the Stoorworm. Then Princess Wyllie opened a jar containing glowing peat that they'd taken from the fire by the castle. They blew on the peat, not once, but twice and 3 times, to make it like a blaze like hot coal. They rammed the peat deep into the liver of the Stoorworm. When they'd done that, Princess Wyllie and Asipattle clung together and waited. Very soon the fire from the peat was beginning to hurt the dragon Stoorworm as it got hotter and hotter, and the more of its liver was burning, the more it howled in torment. It screamed and screamed, groaning in agony. It tried to get rid of the pain in its belly by gagging and spewing, and so the Stoorworm vomited the boat with Princess Wyllie and Asipattle on board, out of its mouth and back into the waters of the loch. As the little boat heaved out, Asipattle stood up. Princess Wyllie handed him the king's sword, Snickersnapper, and Asipattle scalped the dragon Stoorworm in the most tremendous blow on the side of the head, sending Stoorworm rocketing into the sky. It was knocked out cold for 10,000 years and a day. Asipattle kissed the Princess Wyllie 3 times and asked if she'd marry him. The Princess Wyllie kissed Asipattle 7 times and decided that she would. And so they lived long and happy together in the land of Scotland. And did you ever wonder if the dragon Stoorworm would return, I hear you ask? Well, Asipattle gave the dragon Stoorworm's head such a clatter with the king's sword that the Stoorworm's tongue and eyes and teeth flew out. The tongue went east and landed between Scotland and Norway, 2 countries that were at the time joined together. It crashed to the earth with a thump so hard that Scotland and Norway split apart and created the North Sea. The Stoorworm's eyes popped and they went west, spinning around and around. They plummeted deep into a stretch of water between Jura and Scarborough. They continue to spin to this very day, and this place is known as the Whirlpool of Corryvreckan. One by one, the shattered teeth of the Stoorworm splashed down around Scotland and formed isles and islets and skerries, including the beautiful Shetland Islands. The whole of the Stoorworm's body went north, landing with a terrific thud. The sea hissed and boiled for a while, but the cold Arctic Ocean froze around and over it, and the great lump became known as the country of Iceland. Here lies still the dragon of Stoorworm, deep below the snow and ice, but every so often, when he is disturbed, he opens his mouth with a great belch of smoke, and fire erupts from the earth, and flames leaped high into the sky. Some folk call these volcanoes, but it is really this dragon of Stoorworm snoring in his sleep. And that is the end of the story of the dragon of Stoorworm.
our annual clan gathering weekend, but obviously there isn't a gathering, but David is here carrying on doing all the work as usual. And
Not all the work, but some of the work.
what have you found most challenging with all the COVID restrictions?
Well, the very fact that we've got this disease here, the ins and outs of the disease are irrelevant, but we have regulations to work through. And we've actually managed, by applying just common sense within the castle, giving fairly clear directions and limiting the number of folk within the castle, it's worked well. So much so that we've had 800 folk here in the 11 days we've been open. Busiest day 92, worst day yesterday, changeover day for holiday homes, down to 24. But nevertheless, it's working. People are keen to be out. Some are timid, as you would expect. Most are quite British, in the sense that they accept there's things going on, but they take steps to protect themselves, as with the castle, and life carries on. I think with the short season we'll have, we'll be able to roll on to next year, all being well, especially as numbers are reasonably high. Folk are keen to get away, and because up in Scotland, the effect of this terrible contagion is probably less pronounced.
Good. And I think today we've got the best weather we could possibly have for the games.
You're seeing Scotland at its best.
I know, and everything's cancelled.
And everything is cancelled, everything's closed, yeah.
And do you have, over all the years you've been here, do you have a highlight, anything that's been the best part of
I couldn't say
years?
because I do this job for the love of the job, so there's been many, many highlights. From astoundingly good weddings to very good visits by people to congratulations on the castle itself from people who don't know, they just come and see the place and think it's wonderful, purely and simply because the freedoms that we give here, as opposed to some of the museums which are highly restricted, we allow people to feel this place.
Yeah.
So they can wander around, poke around, as long as they don't go over the score. One if you have. So I've had to cascade up there going, no you can't, eh? But generally speaking, it works well. And I'd say to try and pinpoint a highlight would be disingenuous to the castle. There's just so many, to be honest. So many, from the Polish memorial to last year when we opened our little memorial for the Sikhs. But these are tiny, tiny one-day things.
I guess
There's
they
been
all
a
add up.
constant, yeah, they do, and they do. Overall, my time here has been enjoyable.
Good.
There is downsides when you're cutting the grass in the garden and you only cut it 5 days ago and you know it's grown an inch, or when you inadvertently planted some ivy that I'm going to have to strip down,
Oh,
and in
dear.
3 years it's grown. So that's one of my minor tasks.
Well, thank you very much for everything you do for the castle and for letting us come this
It's a
morning.
pleasure. It's just a shame we're not seeing the full fig.
I know. Well, you can have a
And I would
rest.
normally be in full fig as opposed to grass cutting order.
Thank you very much, David.
It's a pleasure. Shake, shake.
Shake, 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 shake.
Hello there, from Castle Mingus.
Thank
See
you very
there.
much indeed.
Pleasure. We'll see you shortly, yeah?
Not yet, darling. I was going to get a photo of Daddy in it. Yeah, tomorrow. Can we get all wet, darling? We could walk around here one morning and just go with me and you and show you and Manya.
I know, it's all got to blow in
Hey, nice to see you.
Okay, everybody. Marshall.
Well, that was quite chuffing. Yeah.
They grow underground and they should just be boiled.
When I was small, and our kids were small, we used to get 4 pounds.
When living in the south side of Glasgow, I don't think it was a term that was familiar at all. It might not have been a potato doing anything.
Yeah, that's good. That's good.
Could you not get pictures now taken over by someone else and there's a place different?
That was the main place.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, it's funny, I've been lunching with the youth like twice a year.
That was outside the estate. Yes, see, yes. Oh yes, that was on the estate. That's when I get... Oh right, up there, with that one.
Good morning everybody, this is the 2020 gathering, almost. We finished our march and I thought it would be nice to say hello to some of our regular guests. This is Anne Todd, and I just wanted to know, Anne, where was it you first came to the Menzies gathering?
I came years ago, so many years ago I can't remember exactly when. Angus's mother and father, Muriel and Ray Todd, said, why don't you come to the gathering? So I said, yes, great. So I've really enjoyed it. And of course, Angus came here when he was 12 years old. So he probably has more history of the castle than I have, but I've certainly enjoyed my time. met so many nice people and had such fun. I'm sorry that we can't have it all today.
Thank you very much. Well, maybe next year we'll have it bigger
Absolutely.
and better. Thanks very much,
I will
Jan.
be there.
Excellent. Thank you. He might actually. So this is my daughter Kirsty Bryce. We have had our march this morning. We've come to the Ale and Cregan for our lunch. And I wanted to ask Kirsty how long she'd been coming to the clan and also about her Friends of Castle Mingus badge.
Thanks, Mum. I've been coming to Castle for approximately about 10 years, I think, Mum. I now come with my 2 children, a 1-year-old and a 3-year-old, and my husband. So we've been coming as a family for years and years. I'm a friend of Castle Mingus. This is my badge here. To do my little bit to keep the castle going. The castle could do with extra funds from the members. So I think offering my small support as a bit of added extra cash for the castle is the least I can do for enjoying the castle. It's a beautiful sunny day, and we hope you can all join us next year.
We started up the Friends of Castle Mingus to try and bring in extra funds, as Kirsty said, so that there's always something trickling in to help us buy new items for the castle and to help with the upkeep of such an old building. Thank you very much, Kirsty.
Thank you.